Divorced Bridezillas, what's your best revenge but karma came back to haunt you? Story 1. My cousin, let's call her Lisa, was the ultimate bridezilla. She demanded that her bridesmaids pay for extravagant dresses, forced guests to give cash gifts, and even uninvited people who couldn't afford to travel to her destination wedding. She married a wealthy guy and acted like a queen until the divorce. Turns out, her husband had been cheating on her with her best friend since before the wedding. Lisa got nothing in the divorce because she had signed a prenup in her arrogance, thinking she'd never need it. Furious, she tried to take revenge by exposing his affair to his family and social media. It backfired horribly because not only did his family already know, but they also despised Lisa for being a gold digger. They exposed her instead, showing receipts of her extravagant spending and her attempts to sabotage his business. Now she's living in a tiny apartment drowning in debt, and her former best friend is living the life Lisa wanted. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. Story 2. My ex-fiancée, Emily, was a textbook bridezilla. She treated my family like servants, berated my mother for suggesting a cheaper venue, and made me feel like my only purpose was to fund her dream wedding. She even tried to make my sister, who had just given birth, lose weight so she could look good in the pictures. 3 months before the wedding, I finally snapped and called it off. She was devastated, not because she lost me, but because she lost the wedding. To get back at me, she spread rumors that I had cheated on her, hoping to ruin my reputation. She even tried to take legal action to keep the engagement ring, which was a family heirloom. Karma, however, worked fast. The lawyer laughed her out of the office. Her lies got exposed, and she became a joke among our mutual friends. A few years later, I married a wonderful woman who actually respects people. Emily, meanwhile, is still single, bitter, and wondering why no one wants to marry her. Story 3. I was the maid of honor for my former best friend Rachel, who turned into a complete monster leading up to her wedding. She threw tantrums over everything. The venue, the flowers, even the weather forecast. When her fiancé called off the wedding because of her behavior, she blamed me. She claimed I had secretly tried to seduce him, which was ridiculous because I was happily engaged myself. She went on a campaign to ruin my engagement, spreading lies to my fiancé and even showing him fake messages she had edited to make it seem like I was unfaithful. My fiancé didn't buy it, and we got married anyway. But karma hit her hard. Her ex-fiancé got back together with his actual ex, the one he had been with before Rachel. Meanwhile, Rachel lost most of her friends, and last I heard, she was still living with her parents, struggling to get a date. Story 4. A friend of mine, Jessica, was the most insufferable bridezilla ever. She fired 3 wedding planners, screamed at vendors, and forced her bridal party to sign contracts saying they couldn't gain or lose weight before the wedding. She married a man who, honestly, was way too kind and patient for her. Fast forward 2 years, and she suddenly announced they were divorcing. She went nuclear, taking revenge by keying his car, trashing his apartment, and trying to get full custody of their dog just to hurt him. She even spread lies about him being abusive. Her revenge was short-lived, though, because his lawyer wiped the floor with her in court. She lost everything, including the dog. She tried to move on, but word of her behavior spread, and now no one wants to work with her, let alone date her. Last I heard, she was still ranting about how the world is unfair. Story 5. My ex-wife, Melissa, was the ultimate bridezilla. She made me take out a loan for her dream wedding, refused to contribute a penny, and even told my mother she had to gift us at least $10,000 or she wouldn't be invited. A year into our marriage, she drained our joint account and filed for divorce because she deserved better. She took everything. Our furniture, my car, even my dog. Her plan was to marry rich, but karma had other ideas. Her new man turned out to be a con artist who drained her bank account instead. He stole her jewelry, maxed out her credit cards, and left her stranded. She tried to come crawling back to me, but I was already living my best life. Now she's alone, broke, and stuck in a tiny apartment with no one to scam. Revenge never tasted so sweet. Story 6. My ex-fiancée, Amanda, was a total bridezilla. She wanted a wedding that would have cost more than my yearly salary, complete with a castle venue, imported flowers, and a designer dress. When I suggested a budget-friendly alternative, she lost it, saying I wasn't man enough to give her the wedding she deserved. I should have taken that as a sign, but I was blinded by love, or maybe fear. We went forward with the wedding, and within 6 months of being married, she filed for divorce. Why? Because I wouldn't buy her a brand new luxury car. She thought she'd get alimony and half of everything I owned. Turns out, my lawyer was smarter than she was. The prenup she laughed at before signing saved me. She got nothing. In a fit of rage, she tried to spread rumors that I was abusive and cheating, but karma came fast. Her own friends turned against her, and she got blacklisted from our social circle. Last I heard, she's bouncing from job to job, still trying to find her next rich husband. Story 7. My cousin Sarah had always been self-absorbed, but her wedding took it to another level. She forced her bridesmaids to pay for their own dresses, hair, and makeup, and even told her sister she couldn't be part of the wedding because she wasn't pretty enough for the pictures. The cherry on top? Sarah banned her fiancé's disabled mother from attending because she thought a wheelchair in the photos would ruin the aesthetic. That was the final straw. Her fiancé dumped her a week before the wedding. Sarah lost her mind. She blamed everyone: her ex, her bridesmaids, even her parents for not supporting her enough. She demanded that guests still send her wedding gifts, saying she deserved compensation for her heartbreak. Karma wasn't done with her, though. A year later, she tried to get back with her ex. Too bad for her. He had already moved on and married someone else. Sarah is still bitter and single, and no one in the family wants to deal with her anymore. Story 8. My former best friend Rachel was set to marry a rich guy, and she let everyone know it. She treated her bridesmaids like unpaid employees and even made one of them cry over a bad makeup trial. She told me to lose 10 pounds before the wedding or she'd find a new maid of honor. Things got worse when she started cheating on her fiancé. She bragged about how she had a backup plan in case the wedding didn't happen. She thought she was untouchable, but karma had the last laugh. The groom found out everything 2 days before the wedding and left her at the altar. He didn't just cancel the wedding. He had a lawyer cut her off from everything, including the luxury apartment he had rented for her. She went from almost being a rich wife to living in her parents' basement. She tried to get sympathy, but after how she treated everyone, no one cared. I haven't spoken to her in years, and I don't regret it. Story 9. My ex-wife, Jenna, was an absolute nightmare from the moment we got engaged. She treated wedding planning like a military operation and made insane demands. She even told my groomsmen they had to pay for her bachelorette party. Fast forward to our marriage. She drained my bank account and maxed out my credit cards, then left me for a guy she met on vacation. She thought she'd hit the jackpot because he was older and wealthy. Turns out, karma had a sense of humor. He left her too, but not before she quit her job thinking she'd never have to work again. Suddenly, she had no husband, no job, and a mountain of debt. Now she's working a minimum wage job, struggling to make rent. Meanwhile, I've moved on and married someone who actually loves me. And yes, I made sure to have a prenup this time. Story 10. My coworker Lisa was the worst bridezilla I've ever seen. She treated her fiancé like an accessory and demanded he propose with a 2-carat ring minimum. She made all her bridesmaids buy custom-made dresses from a designer and even told them to get spray tans to match her aesthetic. The real kicker? Lisa sent out invoices to guests who didn't give gifts above a certain value. She literally billed people for not spending enough. When a guest called her out, she uninvited them from the wedding. Fast forward a year, her husband realized he made a huge mistake. He divorced her after catching her trying to seduce his business partner. She thought she'd walk away with half of everything. She forgot one thing: he had a prenup. Now, she's struggling to maintain the high-maintenance lifestyle she thought she deserved. No husband, no money, and her reputation is destroyed. Some of us still work with her, and let's just say, no one ever lets her forget it. Story 11. My ex-fiancée, Claire, thought she was royalty. She demanded a wedding that would have cost 6 figures, complete with a horse-drawn carriage, a designer wedding gown, and a cathedral she had no religious affiliation with. She threw a tantrum when I suggested we stay within budget, and even told my dying grandmother that she needed to hold on until after the wedding because she didn't want any funerals messing up her big day. That was the final straw. I called off the wedding a month before it happened. Claire lost it, telling everyone I ruined her life. She tried to sue me for emotional distress and demanded I reimburse her for her non-refundable wedding expenses. The best part? The wedding fund was my money, not hers. Karma struck fast. A year later, she got engaged to a wealthy man. She thought she finally got what she deserved. Turns out, he had a prenup so airtight she couldn't even claim girlfriend privileges. He dumped her when she got caught cheating, and now she's back living with her parents, in debt from the wedding that never happened. Story 12. My sister Megan was the most entitled bride I've ever seen. She expected my single mom to take out a loan to help her pay for a luxury wedding, even though my mom was already struggling financially. When our mom refused, Megan uninvited her from the wedding. Yes, her own mother. She said she didn't want poor energy at her elegant event. She didn't even let our mom know when the wedding happened. Fast forward 2 years. Her rich husband divorced her after she drained his savings. She tried running back to our mom, but guess what? Mom had just bought a house for herself with the money she saved by not funding Megan's wedding. Megan is now working retail, begging family members to help her financially. Story 13. My best friend Sophie was a total bridezilla. She forced her bridesmaids to sign contracts saying they couldn't get pregnant, change their hair color, or gain weight before the wedding. She even picked fights with her fiancé's elderly grandmother because she didn't want her in any photos, saying it would ruin the aesthetic. That was the last straw for the groom. He dumped her 2 weeks before the wedding. Sophie had already spent most of his money on non-refundable deposits and threw a huge fit when he refused to pay for anything else. She tried taking him to court, but since they were never married, she got nothing. Karma didn't stop there. A few months later, she lost her job because she kept taking time off to recover from the trauma. Now, she's unemployed, single, and the laughingstock of our entire town. Story 14. My ex-wife Laura was a nightmare bridezilla. She didn't just demand a lavish wedding, she also made me sign a contract saying I had to lose weight before the wedding photos. The marriage didn't last. She wanted a husband who would worship her like a queen, not an actual partner. The moment she realized marriage wasn't just fancy vacations and gifts, she cheated on. She thought she was upgrading when she ran off with her boss, except he was married. His wife found out and destroyed both of them in court. Laura got fired and dumped when her boss went back to his wife. Now, she's back living in her high school bedroom at her parents' house, while I'm happily remarried and living my best life. Story 15. My former coworker Lisa was a bridezilla legend. She booked a $50,000 wedding on her fiancé's card without asking. When he told her they needed to cancel, she faked a pregnancy to get him to agree to keep the date. But karma didn't wait for long. The groom's sister overheard Lisa bragging about her fake pregnancy at her bachelorette party and told him everything. He called off the wedding the next morning. Lisa tried to get revenge by claiming he was abusive, but his family had texts, voice recordings, and even security footage proving she was lying. She lost her job, her apartment, and her entire reputation. Last I heard, she was working at a gas station, still complaining about how she almost had it all. Story 16. My ex-wife, Vanessa, was the definition of a gold-digging bridezilla. She refused to get a job, spent all my money on designer clothes and wedding expenses, and still complained that I wasn't providing enough. She insisted on an extravagant wedding, complete with a $15,000 wedding dress, a horse-drawn carriage, and a week-long honeymoon in the Maldives. I drained my savings, took out a loan, and went into debt to make it happen. 3 months later, I found out she was cheating on me with a guy she met at our own wedding. She filed for divorce and assumed she'd get half of everything. Too bad she didn't realize I had a prenup. She walked away with nothing but the debt from the luxury honeymoon she insisted on paying for herself. The guy she cheated with dumped her when he realized she was broke. Now, she's back living with her parents while I'm happily engaged to someone who actually respects me. Story 17. My cousin, Brittany, was a bridezilla from hell. She made her bridal party sign NDAs so they wouldn't talk about her wedding planning. She told guests they had to wear pastels only so she could stand out in the photos. Then, she took it to another level. She banned her maid of honor from getting engaged before her wedding, saying, "I don't want to be upstage." When the MOH ignored her, Brittany kicked her out of the bridal party, after she had already spent thousands on dresses and bachelorette trips. But karma struck fast. A week before the wedding, Brittany's fiancé dumped her. Turns out, he found out she had been sleeping with her personal trainer. She tried to beg him back, but he was already done. Now she's single, her family has cut her off financially, and her ex is happily engaged to her former maid of honor. Story 18. My ex, Emily, was obsessed with having a picture-perfect wedding. She forced me to redo my proposal 3 times because the photos weren't aesthetic enough. She made her bridesmaids go on crash diets and pay thousands for a destination wedding in Santorini. She thought she was marrying up, until my dad quietly cut me off financially. She found out the wedding wasn't going to be a multi-million-dollar event and started treating me like garbage. I had enough. I left her 3 months before the wedding. She completely lost it, telling everyone I had ruined her life. She even tried to sue me for wasting her time. Karma hit hard. Since she quit her job thinking she'd be a trophy wife, she had no money and nowhere to go. Her bridesmaids ditched her when they found out she had spent their deposit money on herself. Now she's back living with her mom, while I'm dating someone who doesn't care about aesthetic proposals. Story 19. My ex-wife Jessica treated our wedding like a corporate business deal. She scheduled weekly marriage meetings where I had to give progress reports on my finances. She forced me to sign an agreement saying I'd pay for a house, a luxury car, and a yearly vacation. If I failed, she had the right to file for divorce with financial compensation. Too bad she didn't realize I had a lawyer look it over. The contract? Not legally binding. When she finally filed for divorce after less than a year, she thought she'd get half my assets. Instead, she got nothing because she had signed a real prenup without reading it. Now she's trying to sue the lawyer who drafted it, while I'm happily remarried to someone who doesn't treat marriage like a business transaction. Story 20. My former friend Lisa was a bridezilla on steroids. She booked 3 separate engagement parties, made her fiancé pay for a $60,000 wedding, and then cheated on him with his boss. She assumed she'd get away with it because her fiancé was head over heels in love with her. But karma had a surprise. He found out 2 weeks before the wedding. Instead of calling off the wedding outright, he waited until the rehearsal dinner to expose her. In front of her entire family, he played video evidence of her cheating. Her parents disowned her fiancé cut off all financial support, and her job fired her because she had been dating her boss, who was also. Now she's broke, unemployed, and single. And her ex? Happily married to someone way better. Story 21. My ex-fiancé, Madison, was a walking red flag in a wedding dress. She spent months meticulously planning her dream wedding, but never included me in any decisions. When I finally asked why, she said, "It's not about you, it's about me." That should have been my wake-up call. But the final straw? She demanded that my family pay for the entire wedding, despite her parents being millionaires. When my mom politely said they couldn't afford it, Madison uninvited her. So I grew a spine and called off the wedding. She lost her mind and tried to take legal action to reclaim her time and emotional investment. The judge laughed her out of court. A few months later, she tried to reconcile. Turns out, she had spent all the non-refundable deposits on the wedding and was drowning in debt. I left her on red. Now she's broke, single, and desperately trying to find another guy to fund her fairy tale. Story 22. My ex, Sophia, wanted to be a real-life princess. She demanded a $75,000 wedding with a handmade couture gown, imported flowers, and a destination venue in Italy. She expected me to pay for everything despite her making triple my salary. When I brought up a budget, she accused me of not loving her enough. It didn't take long for me to realize that she wasn't in love with me, just the idea of being a bride. I called off the wedding. She went ballistic and tried to smear my name online, claiming I led her on. Karma wasn't done with her. A few months later, her employer fired her after discovering she had been stealing money to help fund her extravagant wedding plans. Now she's unemployed and still paying off the deposits for a wedding that never happened. Story 23. My cousin Natalie was the worst bridezilla I've ever seen. She told her bridesmaids they had to sign contracts promising they wouldn't get engaged, married, or pregnant until after her wedding. She took it even further when she demanded her maid of honor undergo plastic surgery because she thought her nose would ruin the wedding photos. But karma came swinging. Her fiancé caught wind of everything and dumped her. He took back the engagement ring, canceled all the wedding plans, and immediately started dating one of her former bridesmaids. Natalie tried to get sympathy, but everyone turned their backs on her. Now, she spends her time ranting on social media about how fake friends ruined her life. Story 24. My ex-wife, Heather, insisted on having the most expensive wedding possible. She forced her bridesmaids to take out loans to afford their dresses and demanded guests contribute at least $500 each in gifts. She also made me take out a $30,000 loan to cover the wedding, promising we'd pay it back together. Guess what? 2 months into the marriage, she filed for divorce. She had planned it all along. Marry me, take the money, and then... Except karma had a plot twist. The loan was in her name. She walked away with thousands of dollars in debt while I got to keep my savings. Now she's stuck working 2 jobs to pay it all off, while I've moved on with someone who actually loves me. Story 25. My ex-best friend Lauren wanted to be a celebrity bride without actually being famous. She made all her bridesmaids pay thousands for custom dresses, first-class flights, and an over-the-top bachelorette trip. She even tried to charge guests an entry fee to help cover wedding expenses. The groom eventually had enough and left her at the altar. He found out she had been secretly planning to upgrade to a richer man after the wedding. She thought she'd bounce back quickly, except no one wanted to date her after the drama. Now she's still single, still bitter, and still ranting about how the world owes her a dream wedding. Story 26. My ex-fiancée, Olivia, had a fairy tale obsession, but not in a cute way. She wanted a castle wedding, a horse-drawn carriage, and insisted that I dress like a prince for the ceremony. She even wanted sword fights as entertainment. I tried to compromise, but she kept increasing the budget. She quit her job 6 months before the wedding to focus on being a bride, expecting me to pay for everything. When I told her that we needed to cut back, she threw a fit and said, "If you truly loved me, you'd make it happen." That was the moment of clarity. I broke off the engagement. She was so enraged that she tried to charge me for her wasted time. Karma worked fast. She ended up deep in debt from all the non-refundable deposits. She even tried to get back with me, but I was already happily dating someone who doesn't need a castle to be happy. Story 27. My cousin Amber was a high-maintenance bridezilla from day one. She handpicked her bridesmaids based on who looked best in pastel pink and kicked out her best friend because she gained weight. She also refused to allow plus ones unless the guest's date was Instagram-worthy. The worst part? She banned her sister's service dog because she didn't want an ugly animal in her wedding photos. Karma struck on the wedding day. Right before she walked down the aisle, her groom found out she had been cheating and left her at the altar. Amber tried to cover it up, claiming she called off the wedding to focus on herself, but word got out, and now she's humiliated and alone. Story 28. My ex-wife, Danielle, turned our wedding into a money-making scam. She demanded cash gifts only, told guests to pay for their own meals, and even tried to sell VIP seating for the ceremony. She convinced me to take out a $50,000 loan for her dream wedding, saying we'd pay it off together. 3 months into the marriage, she told me she was bored and wanted to experience being single again. She filed for divorce, assuming she'd walk away with half. Karma had other plans. The loan was in her name, so she walked away with nothing but debt. Now she's working overtime just to keep up with payments, while I'm happily engaged to someone who actually respects marriage. Story 29. My former friend Jessica took Bridezilla to a new level. She forced her bridal party to sign a contract, stating they couldn't get pregnant, change their hair color, or gain weight before her wedding. She also expected everyone to spend thousands on matching outfits for the bachelorette trip, bridal shower, and rehearsal dinner. When one bridesmaid said she couldn't afford it, Jessica kicked her out and sent her an invoice for wasted time. Karma came fast. Her groom left her 2 weeks before the wedding after finding out she was only marrying him for money. She tried to guilt him into staying, but he had receipts of her texts complaining about how he was too average-looking for her dream wedding photos. Now she's single, broke, and has lost almost all her friends. Story 30. My ex-fiancé, Lauren, treated our wedding like a Hollywood production. She demanded a film crew, a celebrity makeup artist, and a custom-designed dress that cost more than a car. She also made her bridesmaids sign NDAs, so no one could post pictures of themselves at the wedding until she approved them. The final straw? She tried to ban my mom from attending because she thought she'd clash with the theme. I called off the wedding immediately. She lost her mind and tried to get me to reimburse her for all the wedding expenses. But karma struck hard. She had put everything on credit cards, assuming we'd be married and rich together. Now, she's drowning in debt and regret, while I'm happily married to someone who actually loves me. Story 31. My ex-fiancé, Brooke, was the kind of bridezilla who thought the entire world revolved around her wedding. She wanted a custom-made couture gown, a $10,000 cake, and a helicopter entrance, all on my dime. She demanded that all her bridesmaids get Botox and lip fillers so they'd look flawless in the photos, and told me that I needed to lose at least 20 pounds before the wedding. The final straw? She uninvited my little sister because her wheelchair would ruin the aesthetic. That was when I finally woke up and realized I was about to marry a monster. I called off the wedding, and she went nuclear. She tried to sue me for emotional distress but lost miserably. She ended up stuck with thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits. Now she's deep in debt, single, and still wondering why no one wants to marry her. Story 32. My cousin Hannah was obsessed with having the perfect wedding. She insisted that her bridesmaids spend at least $5,000 each on dresses, travel, and gifts, and threw a tantrum when one of them refused. She also demanded that all guests give cash gifts with a minimum contribution of $500. She even sent a spreadsheet to track who gave how much. Then karma struck. Her fiancé found out she was secretly texting her ex and dumped her right before the wedding. Instead of accepting her fate, she tried to go ahead with the wedding anyway, alone. She even showed up in her dress, expecting her fiancé to change his mind. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Now, she's humiliated and still trying to pay off the debt from her failed wedding. Story 33. My ex Rachel was wedding obsessed, not marriage obsessed. She treated me like a walking ATM, expecting me to pay for a lavish wedding she had been planning since childhood. She quit her job a year before the wedding to focus on planning and expected me to cover everything. She even told me, "Your job is to provide, my job is to look beautiful." Then, the real bomb dropped. 2 months before the wedding, I caught her cheating with her wedding photographer. I immediately called everything off. She was devastated, but not because she lost. She was crying over her dream wedding being ruined. She tried to get back together when she realized she had no job or financial stability. Too bad for her. I was already happily moving on. Now she's broke, single, and still complaining that she deserved the wedding of her dreams. Story 30. My ex-wife, Melissa, treated our wedding like a business deal. She forced me to sign an agreement stating I'd buy her a house, a luxury car, and take her on 2 vacations a year. She even told my mom, "Your son is my retirement." Unfortunately, I was too blinded by love to see the red flags. I married her, and within 6 months, she was demanding more money, refusing to get a job, and spending my savings like water. Then karma struck. She left me for a richer guy. But here's the kicker. He was a scammer. He drained her bank account, stole her jewelry, and left her stranded in a different country. Now she's broke, unemployed, and begging her friends for a place to stay. Meanwhile, I'm happily remarried to someone who actually loves me. Story 35. My former best friend Stephanie was the most entitled bridezilla I'd ever seen. She expected her bridesmaids to pay thousands for their dresses, shoes, and makeup, and when one of them said she couldn't afford it, Stephanie cut her out of her life completely. She even banned children from her wedding because she didn't want crying ruining the moment, including her own niece and nephew. The real karma? Her groom found out she had been texting her ex the entire time and left her 2 days before the wedding. She had already spent all the money, and since she refused to get a job, she had no way to pay it back. Now she's deep in debt, alone, and still wondering why no one wants to be her friend anymore. Story 36. My ex-fiancée, Vanessa, had a wedding binder the size of a college textbook before we even got engaged. I should have taken that as a warning. She planned everything down to the second and didn't care what I wanted. The budget? Sky high. She expected me to pay for a $20,000 wedding dress, a 5-star resort reception, and a honeymoon in Bora Bora. When I suggested a more reasonable budget, she said a real man would make it happen. The breaking point? She tried to take out a loan in my name without telling me. That's when I realized I was about to marry a financial black hole. I called off the wedding and she lost her mind. She tried to sue me for wasting her time. She even tried to keep the engagement ring. But since it was a family heirloom, she had no legal right to. Now she's buried in wedding debt for an event that never happened, while I'm happily engaged to someone who actually cares about marriage, not just the wedding. Story 37. My cousin Ashley was a nightmare bridezilla. She demanded that all her bridesmaids lose 10 pounds before the wedding and even made one get hair extensions to match the rest of the group. She had 3 separate bridal showers, expected everyone to buy her expensive gifts, and threw a fit when someone gave her a handmade quilt instead of cash. Then karma struck. A week before the wedding, her fiancé found out she was cheating. He didn't just call off the wedding. He took back the car he had bought for her and kicked her out of his house. She had nowhere to go because she had quit her job to focus on the wedding. Now, she's living in her childhood bedroom, still ranting about how her wedding was stolen from her. Story 38. My ex-wife, Lindsay, had a wedding list that was longer than a government budget. She wanted diamond-encrusted invitations, a custom-made wedding arch flown in from Italy, and an ice sculpture of us. She expected me to take out loans and even suggested that my parents take out a second mortgage. She promised that after the wedding, we'd live a simple life and pay it off together. But 3 months into the marriage, I found out she was already planning her next wedding to someone else. She filed for divorce expecting to take half. But thanks to my ironclad prenup, she walked away with nothing. Even better? The guy she left me for turned out to be a scammer who took what little money she had left. Now, she's broke, single, and struggling to keep up her Instagram-perfect lifestyle. Story 39. My ex-best friend Katie was the most selfish bride I've ever seen. She told all her bridesmaids they had to spend at least $5,000 each on dresses, bachelorette trips, and gifts. When one of them said she couldn't afford it, Katie kicked her out of the bridal party. She also banned her groom's sister from attending because she had a bad haircut and didn't want her in pictures. Karma struck hard. On the wedding day, the groom had found out she was only marrying him for money, so he waited until the reception to publicly dump her in front of everyone. The best part? He had already emptied their joint bank account and canceled the honeymoon. Now, Katie is broke, single, and has lost most of her friends. Story 40. My ex, Tiffany, treated our wedding like a Hollywood red carpet event. She hired a full production crew, stylists, and even rented luxury cars for a grand entrance. She expected me to pay for everything, even though she made more money than me. When I suggested we cut back on expenses, she called me cheap and said she deserved the best. The final straw? She tried to ban my grandmother from attending because she didn't think she fit the wedding aesthetic. I called off the wedding immediately. She was furious and tried to destroy my reputation, but people saw through her. Now, she's stuck with thousands in wedding debt, while I've moved on and married someone who actually values love over appearances. Story 41. My ex-fiancée, Julia, was so obsessed with being the center of attention that she planned a wedding week, not just a wedding day. There were mandatory events leading up to the wedding, including a bride's appreciation gala, where guests were expected to gift her luxury items, and a bridal boot camp, where the bridesmaids had to attend spa and fitness sessions at their own expense. When I suggested we scale back the costs, she told me, I don't care if we're in debt for 10 years. I deserve this. That was when I finally snapped. I called off the wedding and she completely lost it. She tried to blackmail me by threatening to tell my boss that I was mentally unstable if I didn't pay her for the wasted time. Karma came fast. She had put everything on credit, assuming I'd cover it later. She's now drowning in debt, and to make it worse, most of our mutual friends cut her off after seeing how insane she acted. Now she's broke, bitter, and still trying to find another guy to fund her deserved lifestyle. Story 42. My cousin, Stephanie, was the worst kind of bridezilla. Demanding and delusional, she expected all her bridesmaids to quit their jobs so they could be available at all times for wedding prep. She also banned her maid of honor from wearing makeup because she didn't want anyone to look better than her. When her future mother-in-law suggested a budget-friendly reception, Stephanie banned her from the wedding altogether. The best part? Her fiancé left her at the altar. He had found out she was secretly talking to an ex and realized she was only marrying him for money. Stephanie tried to cover up the embarrassment by pretending she called off the wedding first, but we all knew the truth. Now, she's single, unemployed, and furious that she doesn't have a rich husband to fund her lifestyle. Story 43. My ex-wife, Rachel, treated our wedding like a corporate transaction. She had a marriage agreement that stated I had to deposit a monthly wife fund into her account, pay for 3 luxury vacations a year, and buy her a new car every 5 years. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I should have seen the red flags, but I was in love. We got married, and within 4 months, she told me she wanted to be a stay-at-home influencer. Then karma struck. She ran off with a rich older man, thinking she had hit the jackpot. Except, he was married. His wife found out and destroyed both of them financially. Rachel ended up homeless for a while and had to beg family for a place to stay. Meanwhile, I moved on, happily remarried, and got my revenge without lifting a finger. Story 44. My former best friend, Nicole, was a bridezilla on steroids. She forced her bridal party to sign NDAs so no one could share pictures before she had final approval. She also banned anyone over a size 6 from being a bridesmaid because she wanted a fit and flawless aesthetic. Her final demand? She required every guest to give her a minimum $500 wedding gift. The karma? Her fiancé found out she had been sneaking around with her work husband and dumped her. To make it worse, her job fired her too because she had been using company money to fund wedding expenses. Now she's broke, unemployed, and wondering why everyone she knows has blocked her. Story 45. My ex-fiancé, Lauren, was obsessed with becoming an Instagram-famous bride. She planned her wedding as if it was a fashion show and even hired influencers to attend and promote it. She didn't care about the actual marriage. She told me, "We can always get divorced later, but I need my dream wedding first." That was when I realized this wasn't about love. It was about attention. I called off the wedding and she lost her mind. She tried to sell our wedding date and venue to another couple to make money off the cancellation. Karma came instantly. She had maxed out her credit cards, assuming she'd land brand deals from the wedding. When that fell apart, she was stuck in massive debt with no fiancé and no sponsorships. Now, she's desperately trying to stay relevant online while I'm happily engaged to someone who actually values marriage. Story 46. My ex-fiancé, Tiffany, wanted a wedding that would rival the Met Gala. She expected me to pay for a private island venue, a designer dress flown in from Paris, and a celebrity chef for the reception. When I told her we should stick to a reasonable budget, she laughed and said, "You only get married once." Well, I do, at least. That should have been my first clue. The final straw? She tried to put a $50,000 deposit on my credit card without telling. That's when I realized I was about to marry a financial disaster. I called off the wedding, and she lost her mind. She tried to keep the engagement ring, but since it was a family heirloom, she had no legal right to it. Now, she's drowning in debt from all the deposits she made under the assumption I'd cover everything, while I've moved on to someone who actually understands marriage is about more than a party. Story 47. My cousin Becca was a bridezilla in the worst way possible. She demanded that all her bridesmaids go on diets, wouldn't allow anyone with short hair in the wedding party, and even had a ranking system for guests based on how much they were spending on gifts. She also forced her fiancé to buy her a second engagement ring because the first one wasn't big enough. Karma hit hard when her fiancé realized what a selfish nightmare she was. He dumped her 2 weeks before the wedding. Instead of handling it like an adult, Becca still threw the wedding reception, by herself. She dressed in her wedding gown and made guests attend out of guilt. Now, she's single, embarrassed, and has no idea why people are distancing themselves from her. Story 48. My ex-wife, Melissa, treated our wedding like a business transaction. She made me sign a husband agreement that outlined my responsibilities, including paying for all living expenses, taking her on luxury vacations twice a year, and buying her designer handbags regularly. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. We got married, and within 6 months, she quit her job and told me, "My full-time job is being your wife." Then karma did its thing. She met a wealthier man and left me, assuming she'd get alimony. Too bad for her, we had a prenup. She ended up with nothing. And the guy she left me for dumped her within a month. Now she's jobless, broke, and constantly complaining that she deserves better. Meanwhile, I'm happily remarried and enjoying life without a human leech attached to my bank account. Story 49. My ex-best friend Sarah was obsessed with her wedding to the point of insanity. She wanted her bridal party to all get matching cosmetic procedures and required guests to pass a dress code approval process. The worst part? She banned her groom's disabled sister from attending because she didn't want anyone in a wheelchair ruining the aesthetic. Her groom found out and was rightfully disgusted. He dumped her a week before the wedding and told everyone exactly why. Sarah tried to spin the story and claim she had dumped him first, but no one bought it. Now, she's single, canceled by her own family, and still complaining about how her dream wedding was stolen from her. Story 50. My ex-fiancée, Lauren, wanted to be an influencer bride, except she had no followers, no brand deals, and no social skills. She planned our wedding as if it was a fashion show, complete with outfit changes, scripted vows, and fake candid moments. She didn't even care about the marriage. She told me, "We can always get divorced later, but my wedding has to go viral first." That was my wake-up call. I called off the wedding, and she completely spiraled. She had already taken out loans expecting sponsorships to cover the cost. When the wedding fell apart, she was left drowning in debt. Now, she's still trying to be an influencer while working retail, and I'm engaged to someone who actually cares about the relationship, not the aesthetics. Story 51. My ex-fiancée, Brittany, was obsessed with having a celebrity-level wedding, but on my dime. She expected a $100,000 budget, complete with a horse-drawn carriage, fireworks display, and a live performance from a well-known singer. When I told her we should stick to a reasonable budget, she laughed and said, "If you really love me, you'll find a way." The final straw? She tried to take out a loan in my name without telling. That's when I realized I wasn't marrying a partner. I was marrying a financial sinkhole. I called off the wedding, and she had a complete meltdown. She tried to sue me for emotional distress, but ended up stuck with tens of thousands in wedding-related debt. Now she's broke, single, and still trying to find another guy to fund her fantasy lifestyle. Story 52. My cousin Danielle was the most entitled bridezilla I had ever seen. She had a 6-page list of wedding rules, including all guests must wear white so she could stand out in gold. No one over the age of 50 allowed, because she didn't want old people energy at her wedding. Guests must provide receipts for gifts over $500 to be allowed in the reception. Her bridesmaids were forced to take time off work for dress fittings, and if anyone gained weight before the wedding, they were immediately cut. Then karma struck. Her fiancé found out she was secretly texting her ex and dumped her days before the wedding. Instead of accepting the embarrassment, Danielle tried to throw the wedding anyway, by herself. She still wore her gown and forced her family to show up out of pity. Now she's broke, humiliated, and still wondering why no one wants to deal with her. Story 53. My ex-wife, Melissa, treated marriage like a business arrangement. Before we even got married, she made me sign a husband agreement that stated I had to deposit a monthly wife stipend into her account. I was required to fund at least 2 luxury vacations a year. I had to buy her a new car every 5 years. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. We got married, and within a few months, she quit her job and told me, "It's your responsibility to provide now." Then karma did its thing. She left me for a richer man, assuming she'd live a luxury life. But the guy was a scammer. He emptied her bank account, maxed out her credit cards, and disappeared. Now she's completely broke, struggling to find work and constantly complaining that she deserves better. Meanwhile, I'm happily remarried to someone who actually believes in partnership, not financial extortion. Story 54. My former best friend Olivia was obsessed with having an influencer-level wedding. She forced her bridal party to sign NDAs because she wanted full control over any pictures being posted. She also made height requirements for bridesmaids, so the group photos would look perfect. The worst part? She banned her groom's niece from attending because she didn't want children ruining the aesthetic. Karma struck when her groom found out she was only marrying him for his money. He left her at the altar, but not before publicly exposing her gold-digging texts to all the guests. Now she's jobless, single, and still trying to find another rich man to fund her lifestyle. Story 55. My ex-fiancée, Lauren, was obsessed with going viral. She planned our wedding as if it were a fashion show, complete with outfit changes, scripted moments, and even hired influencers to attend. She even told me, "This wedding isn't about us, it's about my personal brand." That was when I realized this wasn't about love. It was about attention. I called off the wedding and she had a meltdown. She had already spent tens of thousands expecting brand sponsorships to cover the cost, but when the wedding fell apart, she was left with massive debt. Now, she's still trying to become an influencer while working retail, and I'm happily engaged to someone who actually values the relationship over Instagram likes. Story 56. My ex-fiancée, Courtney, had been planning her wedding before we even met. She had a Pinterest board dedicated to every detail and expected me to fund her $80,000 dream wedding, despite me repeatedly telling her we needed to stick to a budget. Her demands were insane. She wanted a carriage entrance, designer bridesmaid dresses, and a diamond-encrusted veil. When I told her we couldn't afford it, she said, "Well, my future husband will make it happen." That's when I realized she wasn't talking about. Turns out, she had been secretly dating a wealthier guy behind my back. She was waiting to see which one of us would fund the wedding before deciding who to marry. I found out and called off the wedding immediately. The best part? The other guy dumped her too when he found out her plan. Now she's broke, single, and crying about how she deserved a luxury wedding. Story 57. My cousin Amber was a nightmare bridezilla. She forced her bridesmaids to lose weight, tan, and get identical haircuts. She even picked her bridal party based on who looked best in pastel pink. She also made a wedding guest ranking list, where people were ranked based on how much they were willing to spend on gifts. If your gift wasn't at least $500, you were downgraded to the B list. Then karma struck. Her fiancé caught wind of everything and dumped her the week before the wedding. Amber refused to accept it and still threw the wedding anyway, alone. She dressed in her wedding gown and forced her family to show up. Now she's single, broke, and still ranting about how her wedding was stolen from her. Story 58. My ex-wife Jessica saw marriage as a business deal. Before we got married, she made me sign an agreement that included a monthly wife stipend to her bank account, a promise to fund a vacation every 6 months, a new car every 5 years. I was stupid and in love, so I went along with it. Then, 3 months into the marriage, she quit her job and said, "Being your wife is my full-time career now." Then karma struck. She met a richer man and left thinking she had upgraded, but the guy was a scammer. He drained her accounts, stole her jewelry, and vanished. Now she's broke, jobless, and desperately trying to find another rich husband. Meanwhile, I'm happily remarried to someone who actually values love over money. Story 59. My former best friend, Lisa, was obsessed with making her wedding a viral event. She forced her bridesmaids to sign NDAs so that only she could control the photos. She also banned anyone over a size 6 from being a bridesmaid because she wanted a perfectly symmetrical look for her wedding party. Her biggest demand? No children at the wedding, not even her own niece and nephew. Her fiancé found out and dumped her 3 days before the wedding. She tried to save face by pretending she canceled first, but everyone knew the truth. Now she's broke, unemployed, and still trying to stage fake wedding photos for social media. Story 60. My ex-fiancée Lauren saw our wedding as a way to become famous. She hired a production crew, multiple stylists, and even booked fake influencers to attend. She told me, "This isn't about us, it's about my personal brand." That's when I realized she cared more about the wedding than the marriage. I called off the wedding, and she had a complete meltdown. She had already racked up thousands in debt expecting sponsorships to pay for it all. Now, she's working retail, still trying to be an influencer, and drowning in wedding debt for a wedding that never happened. Meanwhile, I'm engaged to someone who actually values relationships over Instagram likes.